Hey, this is Kato Fabrega, and I'm doing the Unit 3 project. And so 7 questions, and the first question was 2 cosine cubed theta minus cosine theta equals 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cosine out here. So it's cosine theta, parentheses 2 cosine theta squared minus 1 equals 0. And then from here, I can just do the unit circle and find that cosine equals 0, and for that, using quadrant 1 and 2 for cosine, the theta is equal to pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. But we're not done there. Since we have this, we have to go and do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is just write it out. 2 cosine theta squared minus 1 equals 0. And then I'm just going to take the negative 1 and the 2, and I'm just going to bring the negative 1 over. So I'm going to do cosine theta squared equals, and then I'm going to bring this one over, and I'm also going to divide by 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, it's going to say 1/2, and then it's going to do cosine theta equals a plus or minus, because we're taking the square root, or the square out, plus or minus the root of 1/2, which equals a plus or minus root 2 over 2. And for that, with quadrant 1 and 2, the theta is going to equal pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4. Just like that. So that's number 1. Going on to number 2, the question is 2 cosine theta plus tan theta equals secant theta. And so what I did was I just did a 2 cosine theta squared, 2 cosine theta squared plus sine equals 1. And then from there on, I did a 2 cosine squared theta minus 1 plus sine equals 0, because I wanted to make sure this 1 was onto the other side, because I want it to equal 0. And then I did negative 2 sine squared theta plus sine theta equals 0. And then from there, I did negative sine theta and multiplied 2 sine theta minus 1, and then that equals 0. And from there, I, knowing that these would do the same as the first question, I knew that theta would be a 0, pi over 6, and 5 pi over 6. And so that's for the first 2 questions. Going on to the third question, the question was sine theta equals tangent theta. And so with this is automatic trig identity. So what I did was I just did the trig identity of sine theta over cosine theta. And then with that, I moved the sine over cosine theta over, and then I did a sine theta, and then I did another trig identity, which was actually I pulled out the sine theta, so it's 1 minus 1 over cosine theta equals 0. And then from here, I did just like I would do for the first 2 questions. I did sine theta equals 0 and pi. And then from here we have more work to do, which is 1 minus 1 over cosine theta equals 0. And then so what I did there was I just moved the 1 over cosine theta over, so I did 1 equals 1 over cosine theta right here. And then from there I did 1 equals cosine theta, and that is just equal to theta 0. So that's number 3. Question number 4 was cosine x cotangent squared x equals cosine x. And so what I did here was I just did the trig identity for cotangent, and I went cosine x multiplied by cosine x over sine x, which is the trig identity, equals cosine x. And from there I did cosine x squared, because there's going to be 2 cosines, or cosine x cubed actually, because I use this cosine and bring it over, so cosine x cubed over sine x minus cosine x equals 0. And then I did cosine, I pulled a cosine x out, so this will be a cosine x out, so now it's cosine x squared minus sine x squared, put those in parentheses, minus 1, because we're factoring out the cosine x, and that is equal to 0. And from there, I can just use the cosine x and get cosine x equals 0, and x equals x over, or pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2, because I know that cosine is always quadrant 1 and 2. And from here, I have to use that to find the other areas, and that is just using the, just coming back to it, it's cosine x squared over sine x squared minus 1. So with the minus 1, or equals 0, I'm just going to bring the 1 over, so it's cosine x squared over sine x squared equals 1. And then from there, I just took the sine x and moved it over here. So I did cosine x squared equals sine x squared. And from there, using the unit circle, I got x equals pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. So to question 5 now. Question 5 was sine theta plus 2 cosine squared theta equals 1. So automatically, I knew that this was a trig identity, and so what I did was a sine theta plus a 2 parentheses 1 minus sine squared theta equals 1. And then from there I did sine theta plus 2 minus 2 sine theta, 2 sine squared theta, because I'm going to factor the 2 into that, equals 1. And then from there I did a negative 2 sine theta plus sine theta plus 1 equals 0. And from here, because I moved that over, and then from here you can see that you can do a factor. And so the factoring would be 2 sine theta plus 1 and negative sine theta plus 1 equals 0. And then with that, I'm just going to bring these down and do 2 sine theta plus 1 equals 0, which is also a sine theta. Moving the 1 and dividing by 2 is going to be a negative 1/2. And using the unit circle with quadrant 1 and 4, since it's sine, it's 7 pi over 6. And let me make that more clear. 7 pi over 6, and then 11 pi over 6. And then with over here, it's negative sine theta plus 1 equals 0. So I'm just going to move the sine theta. So it'll be 1 equals sine theta. And then that is equal to theta equals pi over 2. And so that's question 5. And now we'll do question 6. So question 6 was 2 secant theta sine theta plus 2 equals 4 sine theta plus secant theta. So what you want to do here is you just want to get everything over to one side and move it to an equals 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this stuff all onto this side. So it's 2 secant theta sine theta plus 2 minus 4 sine theta minus secant theta equals 0. And from here we can do factoring by grouping. So let me just do that really quick. And it's 2 secant theta, using these, sine theta minus 4 sine theta. And I'm just going to factor that and then factor a negative secant theta minus 2 equals 0. And so with that, I can just take out a 2 sine, because of all common. So I'm going to take out a 2 sine theta, and then that leaves me secant theta minus 2 minus a secant theta minus 2 equals 0. And so with that, I can take out, just like what I did with the previous ones, I'll take those out, and then I do a 2 sine theta minus 1, and then a secant theta minus 2, which equals 0. And then from here, I would do 2 sine theta minus 1 equals 0, and then a secant theta equals 2. And with the sine theta, with this, it's been a common theme. We just move the negative 1 and divide by 2, so that will be 1/2. And then using the unit circle, we can get the answers. Pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, pi over 3, and 5 pi over 3. It's like that. And so question 7, the last question, the question was cosine 2x plus 3 cosine x plus 2 equals 0. So what we can do there is we can just do a 2 cosine